They called her foolish for stopping in the rain. A poor girl with no family, no power, and no reason to risk her life for anyone. But everything changed the night she found a massive scarred wolf chained to a post and left to suffer alone. Everyone warned her to walk away. Everyone told her helping him would destroy her life. But she ignored them. What Elara did not know was that the wounded wolf was connected to the most powerful alpha king in the kingdom. And the tiny cub hiding nearby carried a secret that would change all of their lives forever. One act of kindness. One impossible choice. And a destiny no one saw coming. Stay until the end because this heartbreaking story begins with a chain in the rain and ends with a family built by love, sacrifice, and courage. Some wounds do not bleed. Some scars do not live on skin. They live quietly inside a heart where nobody can see them. On the night everything changed, the rain fell without mercy. Cold rain. Heavy rain. The kind of rain that made the whole world feel forgotten. The road leading toward the village looked empty and lonely beneath the dark sky. Wind swept across the fields, bending the tall grass and carrying the smell of wet earth through the air. The village lights glowed faintly in the distance like tiny stars fighting against the darkness. And walking alone beneath that storm was a young woman named Elara. Her cloak was soaked. Her boots were muddy. Her hands were cold. But none of those things bothered her as much as the ache she carried inside. That ache had been with her for years. Long enough to feel like a part of her. Long enough that she rarely spoke about it anymore. People often noticed what Elara could do for them. Very few noticed Elara herself. That morning she had worked before sunrise helping an elderly woman gather firewood. Later she spent hours sorting herbs for the village healer. When a farmer needed help carrying supplies, she offered her hands without hesitation. When a child fell and scraped his knee, she knelt beside him and comforted him until he stopped crying. By evening she was exhausted. Yet nobody asked if she needed help. Nobody asked if she had eaten. Nobody asked how she was feeling. Life had taught her an uncomfortable truth. Kindness was remembered when people needed it, not when people received it. Still, she never stopped being kind. Because kindness was not something she did. It was something she was. Even when it hurt. Even when nobody noticed. The rain struck harder against her cloak as she continued down the road. Her basket hung from one arm. Almost empty now. Inside rested only a few dried herbs and a small piece of bread she had saved for herself. Her stomach growled softly. She ignored it. She was used to being hungry. She was used to giving away the better portions. She was used to making herself smaller so others could have more. The thought should have made her bitter. Instead it only made her tired. Very tired. A gust of wind swept through the valley. Elara lowered her head against the rain. For a moment she imagined what it would feel like to walk toward a home where someone waited for her. A place where warm lights shine through the windows. A place where her name brought smiles instead of indifference. A place where she belonged. The image lasted only a moment. Then reality returned. She pushed the thought away. Dreams were dangerous things. Especially for people who spent their lives watching happiness from a distance. Thunder rolled across the sky. Deep and powerful. The sound echoed through the hills. Elara kept walking. Then she heard something else. A strange sound. Faint beneath the storm. Metal scraping against wood. She stopped. The sound came again. Low. Weak. Almost painful. Her eyes searched the darkness. The noise seemed to come from the abandoned storage fields near the edge of the village. Nobody went there anymore. The old structures had been empty for years. Most people avoided the area after sunset. Yet something was there. Something alive. Curiosity pulled her forward. One careful step. Then another. Rain ran down her face as she moved closer. The sound grew clearer. Crepe. Crepe. A chill moved through her body. Not fear. Something else. Something she could not explain. Lightning flashed across the sky. For one bright instant the darkness vanished. And Elara saw him. The wolf. She stopped breathing. The animal stood beside an old wooden post driven deep into the ground. Heavy chains wrapped around his neck. The metal looked thick and cruel. Rain poured over dark fur soaked by the storm. The wolf was enormous, far larger than any ordinary wolf she had ever seen. Powerful muscles shifted beneath his coat. Yet despite that strength, something about him felt broken. His body carried scars. Many scars. Some old, some new. Some so deep they made her stomach tighten. One hind leg looked injured. His posture was weary, as if every movement required effort. As if he had been carrying pain for far too long. The sight struck Elara harder than she expected. Her chest tightened. Who could do this? Why would anyone leave a wounded creature chained outside in a storm? The wolf slowly lifted his head. Golden eyes met hers. Elara expected anger. Expected a warning growl. Expected danger. Instead she found something entirely different. Exhaustion. Those eyes looked tired. Not the tiredness that came after a long day. A deeper tiredness. The kind that settled into the soul. The kind that came from surviving too much for too long. For a moment neither moved. Rain fell around them. Wind whispered through the grass. The entire world seemed to grow quiet. Then the wolf lowered his head again. And something inside Elara hurt. Because she recognized that look. She had seen it before. In mirrors. She knew what it felt like to carry loneliness no one noticed. She knew what it felt like to endure pain silently because nobody cared enough to ask. A voice suddenly interrupted the moment. Stay away from it. Elara turned. Two villagers were approaching from the road carrying bundles of wood. One of them frowned when he noticed where she was standing. The other shook his head immediately. That beast is trouble. Leave it alone. Elara looked back at the wolf. Why is he chained here? The men exchanged glances. Neither seemed eager to answer. Finally one shrugged. Because that is where he belongs. The words felt wrong. Cold. Careless. She stared at him. Nobody belongs like this. The second villager sighed heavily. You always worry about things that are not your problem. Maybe because nobody else does. The men looked uncomfortable. One stepped closer. Listen carefully. Whoever owns that wolf is powerful. You do not want trouble from people like that. Walk away. Forget you ever saw him. Elara looked toward the animal again. Rainwater dripped from old scars. The wolf remained silent, patient, as though he expected nothing from anyone anymore. Her heart twisted painfully. The villagers eventually left. Their footsteps faded into the storm. Soon she was alone again. Alone with the rain. Alone with the wolf. Alone with a choice. She should leave. Every sensible thought told her to leave. The chains were expensive. The wolf was unusual. Someone powerful clearly claimed ownership. Helping him could cost her everything. Her work. Her shelter. Her safety. The fragile place she had managed to build within the village. Yet her feet refused to move. She stood there watching him. Watching a creature everyone else had ignored. Watching suffering that people had decided was acceptable. And suddenly she felt tired of looking away. Tired of pretending pain was not there simply because helping carried risks. The wolf slowly raised his head again. Their eyes met once more. A strange understanding passed between them. Not words. Not magic. Just recognition. Two souls carrying invisible scars. Two hearts that understood loneliness. The storm raged around them. But Elara no longer noticed the rain. She only saw the chain. The wounds. The exhaustion. And the silent plea hidden behind those golden eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped forward. The chain rattled softly. The wolf watched her carefully. Yet he did not growl. Did not threaten. Did not move away. Another step. Then another. Closer now. Close enough to see every scar. Close enough to see how deeply the metal had cut into his neck. Close enough to understand that nobody had shown him kindness for a very long time. Fear whispered inside her mind. Turn back. Walk away. Protect yourself. But compassion spoke louder. It always did. Maybe that was why life had been so difficult. Or maybe it was the reason she remained herself despite everything. Ilara slowly reached toward the chain. The cold metal glistened beneath the rain. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears. Fast, steady, certain. She did not know who owned the wolf. She did not know what consequences would follow. She did not know that this decision would change the course of her entire life. She knew only one thing. Leaving him here was wrong. And sometimes doing what was right mattered more than being safe. The wolf watched her silently. The storm roared overhead. And without asking permission from anyone, Ilara made her choice. The moment Ilara touched the chain, she felt how cold it was. Not ordinary cold. A deep, biting cold that seemed to cling to the metal itself. Rainwater slid over her fingers as she wrapped both hands around the heavy links. The wolf remained still. His golden eyes followed every movement she made. Not with suspicion. Not with fear. With quiet attention. As though he could not understand why anyone would come close enough to help. Ilara examined the lock carefully. The iron was old yet strong. Far stronger than anything used for livestock or hunting animals. Whoever placed these chains here had never intended for the wolf to escape. A knot formed inside her stomach. The villagers had been right about one thing. This creature belonged to someone powerful. Yet that only made what she saw more disturbing. Power should protect, not destroy. She pulled against the chain. Nothing happened. Again she pulled harder. The metal barely moved. A sigh escaped her lips. The task would not be easy. The wolf lowered his head slightly, almost as if he understood her frustration. Ilara looked into those tired eyes. I am trying. The words came out softly, like a promise. The wolf blinked once. Rain continued to fall around them, heavy and relentless. Ilara searched the abandoned storage area nearby. Broken crates rested beneath a collapsed roof. Old tools lay scattered beneath years of dust and neglect. Most were useless. Rust covered nearly everything. But after several minutes she found what she needed. An iron hammer. Heavy. Still strong enough to work. She returned quickly. Mud splashed beneath her boots. Her hands trembled from the cold. Not fear. Determination. She knelt beside the chain and began striking the lock. The sound echoed through the storm. Sharp. Loud. Dangerous. Each strike felt like an announcement. Each strike felt like a risk. If anyone heard her, they would come looking. Still she continued. Again. 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 Minutes passed. Rain soaked her hair. Her shoulders ached. Her palms burned. Then finally a crack appeared. Hope flickered inside her chest. One more strike. The lock shattered. For a second neither of them moved. The broken chain slipped into the mud. Silence filled the space between them. The wolf was free. Ilara stepped back immediately, giving him room, giving him choice. The wolf slowly rose to his feet. His injured leg trembled beneath his weight. Pain flashed through his eyes. Yet he remained standing. Strong. Proud despite everything. For one heartbeat Ilara wondered if he would disappear into the darkness. Instead he simply stood there looking at her. The rain softened. Only slightly. As though the storm itself had paused to watch. Then the wolf bowed his head. Not deeply. Only a little. Yet something about the gesture felt important. Meaningful. Before Ilara could understand it, a sudden sound broke the moment. Frightened cry. Ma. We. Almost hidden beneath the wind. Both she and the wolf turned instantly. The sound came from the trees beyond the road. Another cry followed. This one softer. The wolf reacted first. His ears lifted sharply. His entire body became alert. Not aggressive. Concerned. Ilara felt her heartbeat quicken. Someone is there. Without hesitation she followed the sound. Branches brushed against her cloak as she entered the forest. The wolf moved beside her, limping slightly but refusing to fall behind. The cries grew clearer. Tiny. Terrified. Then she saw the source. A small wolf cub huddled beneath the roots of an old tree. The little creature was soaked from head to tail. Its fur clung to its thin body. Fear filled its wide eyes. The cub looked exhausted, hungry, alone. The sight shattered something inside Elara. No. She dropped to her knees immediately. The cub attempted a weak growl, but even that sounded tired. The scarred wolf moved closer. The moment the cub saw him, everything changed. Fear vanished. The tiny creature stumbled forward with a cry of relief. The wolf lowered his head gently, touching the cub with his nose. Family bond. Connection impossible to mistake. Elara watched quietly. Questions filled her mind. Who were they? Why had they been separated? Who could chain one and leave the other hidden in a storm? The answers remained buried. But one thing became clear. Helping the wolf now meant helping the cub too. The storm worsened as darkness deepened. Elara knew they could not stay outside. Not tonight. Come with me. She spoke softly. The words felt strange, as though she were speaking to creatures who understood far more than they should. The wolf studied her, then looked at the cub, then back at her. A moment later he followed. Elara led them toward the small cottage she rented at the edge of the village. The journey felt endless. Mud covered the road. Cold wind sliced through the darkness. Several times the cub stumbled. Each time Elara picked him up and carried him. The tiny creature eventually fell asleep against her chest. His body felt frighteningly light, far too light. By the time they reached her cottage, the rain had become a wall of water. Elara pushed open the door. Warmth greeted them. Not much, just enough. The cottage was small. One room. Simple furniture. A narrow bed. A stone fireplace. Nothing luxurious, yet it felt safe. For the first time that night she saw the cub relax. The wolf remained alert, watching everything, watching everyone. Elara quickly built a fire. Orange light filled the room. Shadows danced across the walls. The cub curled beside the warmth almost immediately. Exhaustion claimed him within moments. The scarred wolf stayed awake, protective, silent. Elara searched her shelves for food. The result made her heart sink. Almost nothing remained. A little bread. A small portion of dried meat. Not enough for 3. Not even close. For a brief moment she stared at the supplies, thinking, calculating, worrying. Then she smiled sadly. It was not really a choice. She divided everything into 2 portions. One for the wolf, one for the cub. The wolf looked at the food, then at her. You need it more than I do. Elara laughed softly, though there was little humor in it. The wolf did not touch the food immediately, almost as though he understood what she had given up. Eventually he ate, slowly, carefully. The cub devoured every bite. Hunger had clearly followed him for days. Hours passed. Outside the storm continued. Inside the cottage warmth slowly returned. Elara sat beside the fire watching the flames. The cub slept peacefully. The wolf remained awake, golden eyes reflecting firelight. For the first time all evening she allowed herself to breathe. Then a knock struck the door. Her entire body stiffened. Another knock followed, louder this time. Fear slipped into the room, slow and unwelcome. Nobody visited this late, especially during storms. Elara rose carefully. The wolf stood instantly. Protective instinct flashed through his posture. It is all right, she whispered, though she was not certain it was. The knocking came again. Who is it? A familiar voice answered. Marta from the village. Relief appeared briefly, then vanished, because people rarely visited without reason. Elara opened the door. Marta stood beneath the rain holding a lantern. Her face looked troubled. You need to be careful. What happened? Rumors are spreading. The words landed heavily. Elara felt her stomach tighten. What rumors? People saw you near the storage fields. They saw the wolf. They are talking quickly. Elara glanced back toward the room. The wolf remained motionless beside the fire. Marta followed her gaze, then lowered her voice. Some believe you stole him. Others think dangerous people will come looking. Either way, everyone is asking questions. The warning hung between them, cold and uncomfortable. Ilara thanked her quietly. Marta eventually left. The door closed. Silence returned. But it felt different now. Less peaceful. More fragile. Ilara looked toward the wolf. Then toward the sleeping cub. For the first time she fully understood what her decision might cost. The village was already watching. Questions were already spreading. And somewhere beyond the darkness, someone had likely noticed the missing chains. Someone powerful. Someone dangerous. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, the fire crackled softly. The cub slept peacefully between them, unaware of the shadows moving closer with every passing hour. And far beyond the village, hidden within the darkness of the forest, several riders followed fresh tracks through the rain, searching, hunting, getting closer. Sleep never truly came that night. The fire burned low inside the cottage, casting long shadows across the walls. Outside, the storm continued its endless song. Rain struck the roof. Wind whispered through the trees. The world beyond the small cottage felt restless, dangerous, waiting. Ilara sat near the fire, wrapped in a blanket she barely noticed. Her eyes remained fixed on the wolf and the cub. The cub slept curled tightly against the larger wolf, safe at last, protected. For the first time since she had found them. Yet peace refused to settle inside her heart. Marta's warning lingered in her thoughts. Someone is looking. Someone is coming. The words echoed through her mind again and again. Near dawn, the wolf suddenly lifted his head. Every muscle in his body tightened. His ears turned toward the door. Alert, focused. Ilara immediately noticed the change. What is it? The wolf rose slowly. A low rumble vibrated deep inside his chest. Not anger. Warning. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Faint at first. Then clearer. Several horses moving through the muddy road. Coming directly toward the village. Fear slid down her spine. The riders had arrived. The wolf moved toward the window. The cub woke instantly. Small ears lifting. Golden eyes filled with unease. Ilara carefully pulled aside a corner of the curtain. Her heart nearly stopped. 3 riders entered the village road. Dark cloaks, large horses, silent faces. They were not travelers. Everything about them felt wrong. Purposeful, cold, searching. One rider dismounted near the storage fields where the wolf had been chained. Another studied tracks left by the rain. The third scanned nearby homes. Looking. Always looking. Ilara stepped away from the window. Her pulse raced. If they discovered the wolf here, everything would change. The cub pressed against the larger wolf, seeking comfort. The wolf stood protectively over him. Ilara looked at them both. The answer became clear. They could not stay. Not here. Not in the village. The risk was too great. She quickly gathered supplies. Blanket. A water flask. A few healing herbs. Almost nothing else remained. Her food stores were nearly gone. The choice hurt. But there was no time for hesitation. Come on. Her voice came out soft but steady. The wolf watched her closely, then followed. The cub hurried behind. Minutes later they slipped through the rear of the cottage and disappeared into the forest. The trees swallowed them quickly. Dark branches stretched overhead. The storm had weakened, but the ground remained soaked. Mud clung to every step. Cold air filled their lungs. Still they moved. Faster. Deeper. Far from the village. Hours passed. The forest grew thicker. The world quieter. Only birds and distant streams interrupted the silence. Ilara finally stopped near a rocky hillside hidden beneath ancient trees. Her legs ached. Her stomach felt painfully empty. Yet relief touched her chest. For now they were safe. The cub collapsed beside her immediately, exhaustion pulling him toward sleep again. The wolf remained standing, always watching, always guarding. Elara noticed something troubling then. His injured leg looked worse. Much worse. The long journey had reopened old wounds. Blood-stained dark fur. Fresh pain shadowed his eyes. "You should have rested," she whispered. The wolf simply looked away. Stubborn. Proud. Determined. The sight almost made her smile. Almost. But concern quickly replaced it. If the wound became infected, he might not survive. Elara opened her small pouch of herbs. The amount remaining was disappointing. Not enough. Nowhere near enough. Still she knelt beside him. "Let me help." The wolf hesitated. For a long moment he remained motionless. Then slowly lowered himself to the ground. Trust. A simple gesture. Yet it meant everything. Elara carefully cleaned the wound. The wolf never complained. Never growled. Never pulled away. Only endured. The same way he had likely endured countless hardships before her. The realization hurt. No creature should carry so much pain alone. Hours later the sun finally broke through the clouds. Golden light spilled across the forest. Warm. Gentle. Beautiful. The cub woke and immediately wandered toward a patch of flowers. Curiosity replacing fear. Elara watched him quietly. A small smile touching her face. Then she noticed something strange. The cub stumbled. His legs weakened suddenly. The tiny body swayed. Before she could move, he collapsed. The smile vanished. Fear exploded inside her chest. She rushed forward. The wolf arrived beside the cub instantly. Panic filled his eyes. The cub's breathing had become shallow. Weak. Far too weak. Elara checked him carefully. The answer came quickly. Starvation. Exhaustion. Exposure. His little body had endured too much. If he did not regain strength soon he would die. Whoa. The word escaped before she realized it. Not him. Not after everything. The wolf nudged the cub gently. Desperately. Protectively. The sight shattered her heart. Elara searched her supplies again. Nothing. Almost nothing remained. Not enough food. Not enough medicine. Not enough time. Despair tried to take hold. She refused it. Think. There had to be something. Some way. Some chance. Then her hand drifted toward the small silver pendant hanging around her neck. Her mother's pendant. The last gift she had ever received. A secret hidden within her family line. A rare gift. A healing gift. One she almost never used. Because every use demanded a price. Energy. Strength. Life itself. The more serious the injury, the greater the cost. Elara closed her eyes. She already knew the answer. There was no choice. Not really. She removed the pendant slowly. Sunlight touched the silver surface. Faint glow appeared. Soft and beautiful. The wolf watched silently. Confused yet attentive. Elara placed both hands over the cub. The familiar warmth awakened immediately. Light flowed through her fingers. Golden. Gentle. Alive. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Energy left her body in steady waves. The cub's breathing strengthened. Little. And more. Color returned to his small face. Life returned where weakness had settled. But the healing demanded more. Always more. Pain spread through Elara's chest. Her vision blurred. Sweat formed across her brow. Still she continued. The cub needed her. That was enough. Minutes felt like hours. The golden light grew brighter. Then finally faded. Silence followed. Elara swayed. The world tilted beneath her. The cub opened his eyes. Strong. Awake. Alive. Relief crashed through her heart. A weak smile touched her lips. You are going to be all right. The cub immediately pressed against her. Warm and grateful. But Elara barely felt it. The healing had taken too much. Far too much. She attempted to stand. Her legs failed. The wolf moved instantly, supporting her before she could hit the ground. Strange. How quickly concern appeared inside those golden eyes. As though he had forgotten his own suffering. Elara laughed weakly. You should worry about yourself. The wolf refused to move away. The day continued. Yet her condition worsened. Every hour drained more strength. Her breathing became heavier. Her hands trembled constantly. Even walking required effort. Still she refused to stop. The riders were searching. Danger remained close. They needed shelter. Before sunset they discovered an abandoned hunting cabin hidden deep within the mountains. Small, weathered, broken in places, yet usable, safe enough. For now. Elara gathered wood despite her exhaustion, prepared water, organized supplies. Every task felt harder than the last. The cub followed her everywhere, never straying far. The bond growing stronger with every passing hour. As darkness settled across the mountains, the wolf approached quietly. He lowered himself beside her fire, close enough that she could feel his warmth, close enough that neither felt alone. The moment should have felt peaceful. Instead, dizziness washed over her again. Strong, sudden, merciless. Her vision blurred. The fire became distant. Voices faded. The world felt strangely far away. The wolf noticed immediately. The cub noticed too. Fear filled both faces. "I'm fine," Elara whispered. But the lie sounded weak, even to her. She tried standing. The ground shifted beneath her feet. Pain shot through her body. Her knees buckled. This time she could not stop herself. The world spun. Darkness surged forward. The wolf lunged toward her. The cub cried out. Elara barely heard either sound. Her last glimpse was the firelight reflecting inside two pairs of frightened golden eyes. Then everything disappeared. The cabin grew silent. The storm returned outside. Wind howled across the mountains. Rain struck the roof once more. The cub pressed against her unmoving side. Whimpering softly, the wolf stood guard beside her, watching, waiting, protecting. Hours passed. She did not wake. And far beyond the mountains, hidden beneath the darkness of night, a powerful figure stepped from the shadows and examined fresh tracks leading directly toward the abandoned cabin. His expression hardened. His eyes settled upon the signs left behind by the scarred wolf, then upon the smaller tracks of the cub, and finally upon the faint footprints of the young woman who had risked everything to save them. The search was over. At last he had found them. The night felt endless. Rain continued to fall across the mountains while darkness wrapped itself around the old cabin. Inside the small shelter the fire had almost died. Only a few glowing embers remained. Their faint light danced across the wooden floor and touched Elara's pale face. She had not moved. She had not opened her eyes. Hours had passed. Still she remained trapped somewhere beyond waking. The cub refused to leave her side. His small body pressed against her arm. Every few moments he would lift his head and look toward her face, waiting, hoping, listening for any sign that she would wake. The scarred wolf stood near the doorway, silent, motionless, yet every part of him remained alert. His golden eyes watched the darkness beyond the cabin. Something was changing. He could feel it. The air itself seemed different. Then suddenly his ears lifted. Sound. Footsteps. Not the careless footsteps of hunters. Not the heavy approach of enemies. These footsteps moved with purpose. Steady. Certain. The wolf immediately stepped forward, his body becoming tense. Protective instinct surged through him. The cub noticed the change and quickly moved closer to Elara. A low growl echoed through the cabin. Controlled, warning anyone outside not to come closer. Then a voice broke through the storm. "Easy, old friend." The voice was strong yet gentle. Familiar. The wolf froze. For the first time in days, surprise appeared in his eyes. The cabin door slowly opened. Cold wind rushed inside. Rain followed. And standing in the doorway was a tall man wrapped in a dark cloak. For a moment he looked like part of the storm itself. Powerful, quiet, unshaken by the weather around him. His silver eyes moved immediately toward the wolf. Relief flashed across his face. a rare emotion quickly hidden behind discipline. You are alive. The words were spoken softly, as though he had carried that fear for a long time. The wolf lowered his head slightly, not in submission, in recognition. The man stepped inside. Behind him several guards waited outside. None entered, none spoke. They remained where they were, respecting the silence. The stranger's attention shifted, first toward the cub, then toward Ilara. Everything changed the moment he saw her. His expression hardened, not with anger, with concern. Who is she? The question came quietly. The wolf immediately moved beside Ilara. Protective. The answer was clear even without words. She matters. The man slowly approached, careful not to alarm either wolf. His gaze studied Ilara closely. Pale skin, shallow breathing, visible exhaustion. The signs were impossible to miss. This woman had pushed herself beyond her limits. A healer's sacrifice. A dangerous one. The stranger knelt beside her. For several moments he said nothing. The cub watched him nervously. Then the man noticed the silver pendant resting beside Ilara. Recognition flashed across his eyes. A healing gift. Ancient. Rare. Suddenly everything made sense. He looked toward the wolf again. She saved you. The wolf remained silent. Yet his eyes answered clearly. Yes, she saved us both. The stranger exhaled slowly, almost as if absorbing the weight of that truth. A young woman had found a chained wolf in the rain. A wolf many feared. A wolf connected to one of the most powerful packs in the kingdom. And instead of turning away, she had risked everything. For strangers. Without expecting reward. Without knowing who they were. The realization left him strangely quiet. Prepare the horses. He called toward the guards outside. We leave immediately. One guard stepped forward. My king, what about the trackers? The man stood. His expression becoming calm and commanding. They will not reach her. Not while I am here. The guard lowered his head respectfully. Once. The cub blinked. King. The word carried meaning even if he did not fully understand it. The scarred wolf moved toward the stranger. Toward the Alpha King himself. For the first time the truth became visible. This was no ordinary wolf. No abandoned creature. No forgotten animal. He belonged to the Alpha King's inner circle. A guardian. Protector. Someone deeply important. The Alpha King gently touched the wolf's shoulder. You have suffered enough. The words held genuine care. Not authority. Not command. Then his attention returned to Ilara. We need to save her now. The journey began immediately. Ilara remained unconscious as the Alpha King carefully lifted her into his arms. The cub stayed close. Tall waterfalls poured down ancient cliffs. Green forests surrounded peaceful stone buildings. Lanterns glowed warmly beside winding paths. Children played near gardens. Families gathered beneath wooden shelters. Life existed everywhere. Safe, strong, whole. The cub stared in wonder. The wolf seemed to relax for the first time. And Ilara remained asleep, unaware that her world had already changed. The Alpha King carried her directly toward the healer's house. An elderly woman waited outside. Silver hair, kind eyes. A calm presence that immediately softened the atmosphere. You found them. She smiled gently. Then her gaze landed upon Ilara. Concern quickly replaced the smile. Bring her inside. The healer moved quickly, yet never appeared rushed. Years of experience guided every action. She examined Ilara carefully, listening, watching, understanding. The healing gift drained her. The healer finally said, she gave too much. Can you help her? The Alpha King's voice carried unusual urgency. The healer glanced toward him. A small knowing smile appeared. But recovery will take time. Time is not our enemy. The Alpha King answered. The healer nodded approvingly. Good. Then she will survive. Relief settled across the room. Quiet but unmistakable. Hours later, Ilara finally stirred. The first thing she noticed was warmth. Not firelight, not blankets, something deeper. Safety. The feeling confused her. Slowly her eyes opened. Sunlight streamed through a nearby window. Birds sang outside. Fresh herbs filled the air. For several moments she simply stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, trying to understand where she was. Then memory returned. The cub, the wolf, the storm, the healing. Panic pushed her upright. Immediately dizziness struck. Easy, child. The healer's voice reached her gently. You are safe. Ilara turned. Confusion filled her eyes. Where am I? Home for now. The healer replied. The answer only deepened her confusion. Before she could ask another question, movement appeared near the doorway. The cub rushed into the room. The moment he saw her awake, his entire face brightened. He bounded across the floor and climbed onto the bed beside her. A laugh escaped Ilara before she could stop it. A real laugh. The first in many days. The cub pressed against her happily, as though afraid she might disappear again. You are all right, she whispered. The cub nodded enthusiastically. A second figure appeared then. The scarred wolf. He entered quietly, yet his presence filled the room. Relief softened his golden eyes when he saw her awake. The sight warmed her heart unexpectedly. Then another figure stepped through the doorway. Strong. The Alpha King. Silence settled instantly. Ilara looked at him, and he looked at her. For several moments neither spoke. Something passed between them. Not romance, not destiny, recognition, respect. The understanding that their lives had become connected through sacrifice. The Alpha King finally broke the silence. You protected them when nobody else would. His voice remained steady, gentle. Ilara blinked. The question surprised her. Because they needed help. The answer came naturally. Simple, honest. The Alpha King stared at her, as though expecting something more. There was nothing more. No hidden reason. No desire for reward. Only kindness. Slowly something shifted inside him. Quiet admiration. One he could not ignore. Most people would have walked away. He said, maybe. Ilara replied softly. But I could not. The room fell silent once more. The healer smiled knowingly. The cub settled against Ilara's shoulder. The wolf remained nearby, watching everything. And for the first time in many years, Ilara found herself surrounded by people who looked at her not for what she could give, but for who she was. She did not realize it yet. But the loneliness she had carried for so long had already begun to crack. And standing in the doorway, the Alpha King found himself unable to leave. Because something about the quiet woman who had risked everything for strangers felt impossible to forget. The days that followed felt unlike anything Ilara had known before. For most of her life, each morning had arrived carrying the same familiar weight. Work, responsibility, loneliness. The quiet expectation that she would give more than she received. Yet here inside the Northern Pack, everything felt different. Not because life had suddenly become easy, but because for the first time she no longer carried every burden alone. Sunlight spilled through the healer's windows each morning, painting golden patterns across the wooden floor. Fresh mountain air drifted through open shutters. Birdsong echoed from nearby trees. The world felt alive, peaceful, gentle. Ilara spent the first several days resting. At least that was what the healer ordered. The problem was that Ilara did not know how to rest. Each time she tried sitting still, guilt found her. Someone must need help. Something must need fixing. There must be work waiting somewhere. The healer noticed immediately. One afternoon she entered the room carrying a basket of herbs and found Ilara attempting to fold blankets. The older woman sighed. You are doing it again. Ilara blinked innocently. Doing what? Trying to earn your place. The words landed softly yet struck deeper than any accusation. Ilara lowered her eyes. The healer sat beside her. Child, when was the last time someone cared for you simply because they wanted to? Ilara searched for an answer. None came. The silence itself became her answer. The healer's expression softened. Exactly. Something painful twisted inside Elara's chest. Because she realized she could not remember. Not truly. Not completely. The healer gently squeezed her hand. You do not owe anyone payment for kindness here. Rest because you need rest. Heal because you deserve healing. The words followed Elara long after the conversation ended. That evening she sat alone outside watching the sunset spread across the mountains. Orange light covered the valley. Waterfalls shimmered like rivers of gold. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. Families gathered for dinner. Warmth existed everywhere she looked. Yet part of her still struggled to trust it. Because beautiful things had always disappeared before. The sound of small footsteps interrupted her thoughts. The cub appeared carrying something in his mouth. Flower. Bright blue. Slightly crushed. Yet clearly offered with great care. Elara smiled immediately. Is that for me? The cub nodded enthusiastically. His tail wagging wildly. She accepted the flower as though it were a priceless treasure. Thank you. The cub practically glowed with happiness. Then without warning he climbed onto the bench beside her and leaned against her shoulder. Completely comfortable. Completely trusting. Elara froze for a moment. Not because she disliked it. Because she was not used to it. The simple affection felt strangely overwhelming. Slowly she relaxed. The cub remained there watching the sunset beside her. Content simply to share the moment. And for reasons she could not fully explain, tears threatened her eyes. Not sadness. Something softer. Something warmer. Belonging. A feeling she barely recognized. Days continued passing. Strength slowly returned to her body. Color returned to her face. The exhaustion faded little by little. Meanwhile, the bond between her and the cub grew stronger every day. He followed her everywhere. Through gardens. Along forest paths. Into the healer's workroom. Even during meals. Sometimes he asked endless questions. Other times he simply sat nearby drawing pictures in the dirt. One morning Elara found him staring at a group of young wolves playing near the river. Why are you not joining them? The cub shrugged. I like being with you. The answer came so naturally it stole her breath. She looked away quickly, pretending to study the river. Yet her heart felt impossibly full. Meanwhile, another bond was quietly changing. One neither of them spoke about. The Alpha King visited often. Never unexpectedly. Never intrusively. Always respectful. Always giving her room to choose. Sometimes he came to check on the wolf. Sometimes to speak with the healer. Sometimes for reasons neither could quite explain. Their conversations remained simple at first. Questions about her recovery. Questions about village life. Questions about the journey through the mountains. Nothing dramatic. Nothing forced. Yet every conversation seemed to linger afterward. One afternoon they walked through the valley together. The cub raced ahead chasing butterflies while the scarred wolf followed at a relaxed pace. The Alpha King glanced toward Elara. You are stronger now. Feel stronger, she answered. Though I suspect the healer deserves most of the credit. He smiled slightly. She will be pleased to hear that. The smile surprised her. Because it transformed him. Most people saw power when they looked at the Alpha King. Authority, strength, leadership. But moments like this revealed something different. Kindness, quiet patience. A man carrying responsibility without allowing it to harden him. You keep looking at everyone before you answer. Elara said suddenly. The Alpha King looked amused. What does that mean? You notice people first. Whether they are comfortable. Whether they are worried. Whether they need something. Most leaders focus on being heard. You focus on listening. The Alpha King grew thoughtful. Perhaps because I spent years learning how much damage happens when leaders stop listening. The honesty in his voice caught her attention. There are scars people cannot see. He continued quietly. Power does not protect anyone from those. For a moment neither spoke. The mountain breeze drifted through the trees. Somewhere ahead the cub laughed loudly. The simple sound made both of them smile. Then Ilara noticed something unusual. You seem different around him. Around the cub. The Alpha King's gaze softened immediately. He has been through too much for someone so young. He deserves joy while he can still find it. Again she heard it. The same quality she kept noticing. Gentleness. Not weakness. Never weakness. Strength choosing compassion. The realization settled deeper than she expected. Days turned into weeks. The valley slowly became familiar. People greeted her by name. Children waved when she passed. Families invited her to meals. The kindness remained consistent, steady, real. Yet accepting it still felt difficult. One evening a celebration filled the valley. Lanterns hung between trees. Music drifted through the air. Food covered long wooden tables. Everyone gathered together, laughing, talking, sharing stories. Ilara stood near the edge of the crowd watching quietly. Old habits pulling her toward the shadows. The healer appeared beside her. You are hiding. I am observing. The healer laughed. Same thing. Before Ilara could respond, the cub grabbed her hand. Come with us. His excitement left no room for argument. Moments later she found herself seated among families sharing food and stories. At first she remained quiet, listening, watching, waiting for the familiar feeling that she did not belong. But it never came. People asked questions. People listened to her answers. People genuinely wanted her there. The realization felt almost unbelievable. Later that night she sat near a fire while music played softly nearby. The Alpha King joined her. The celebration suits you, he said. She laughed softly. I am fairly certain it suits everyone except me. Disagree. Because for the first time since arriving you are not standing alone. The words settled gently between them. Ilara stared into the fire. Part of her wanted to argue. Another part knew he was right. Silence followed. Comfortable silence. The kind that required no effort. No performance. No pretending. Then the Alpha King spoke again. When I first found you in that cabin, I expected gratitude after you recovered. Ilara glanced toward him. Instead you keep looking for reasons to leave. The observation surprised her. Was she truly that obvious? Maybe I do not know how to stay. She admitted quietly. The Alpha King considered this. Then he nodded. That is fair. No pressure. No argument. No attempt to convince her. Only understanding. The response touched her more than any speech could have. Because he respected her choice even when he hoped for a different answer. That night long after the celebration ended, Ilara stood alone beneath the stars. The valley slept peacefully around her. Moonlight painted silver across rooftops and forests. Footsteps approached. The cub appeared wrapped in a blanket. Unable to sleep, he admitted. Ilara smiled. Neither can I. The cub looked up at the sky, then at her. A serious expression appeared on his face. One rarely seen from someone so young. You are not leaving, are you? The question struck directly at her heart. For a moment she could not answer. Fear lingered there. Old fears. Old wounds. The fear of trusting something only to lose it. The fear of belonging somewhere only to be rejected later. The cub waited patiently. Finally Ilara knelt beside him. I do not know yet. The answer was honest. The cub nodded slowly. Then wrapped his arms around her. Hope you stay. The simple words nearly broke her. Because nobody had ever said them before. Not like this. Not with such sincerity. Not with such love. The cub eventually fell asleep against her shoulder. Ilara remained there beneath the stars holding him carefully. Across the valley another figure watched from a distance. The Alpha King. He made no move to interrupt. Made no move to approach. Instead he simply stood there quietly. Watching the woman who had changed all their lives without even realizing it. And for the first time in many years a future he had never imagined began taking shape inside his heart. Not built upon destiny. Not built upon power. Built upon trust. Something far rarer. something far stronger. And as moonlight covered the peaceful valley, Elara slowly realized a truth she had spent years avoiding. Home was not always a place. Sometimes it was people. And for the first time in her life, she was beginning to wonder if she had finally found both. Morning arrived quietly across the valley. Golden sunlight spilled over the mountains. Mist drifted above the waterfalls. Birds moved through the trees singing to the new day. Everything looked peaceful. Everything looked calm. Yet inside Elara a storm still remained. The valley had become familiar. The people had become familiar. The cub had become part of her daily life. Even the Alpha King had become a steady presence she no longer expected to lose. And that frightened her more than she wanted to admit. Because the more she cared, the more there was to lose. For years she had protected herself with distance. Distance hurt less. Distance demanded less courage. But now every wall she had built was beginning to crack. That morning she walked alone toward the river. The same river where children often played. The same river where she had spent many afternoons helping the healer gather plants. The water moved smoothly over polished stones. Clear, bright, endless. Elara sat beside it and watched the current flow. Lost in thought. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to ask the question she had been avoiding. What happens next? The answer refused to come. The future remained uncertain. And uncertainty had always frightened her. Footsteps approached from behind. She did not need to turn around. She already knew who it was. The Alpha King stopped beside her. Neither spoke immediately. The silence felt comfortable, like an old friendship. The river continued flowing. Birds called from distant trees. Life moved around them, patient and unhurried. You have been thinking too much, the Alpha King finally said. Elara laughed softly. Is it that obvious? Only to someone doing the same thing. That answer surprised her. She looked at him. The Alpha King stared toward the water. Thoughtful, quiet, almost vulnerable. What are you thinking about? She asked. He smiled faintly. Many things. Responsibilities. The future. The people I care about. Something in his voice made her heart tighten. The people I care about. Simple words. Yet they carried weight. For a moment neither spoke again. Then the Alpha King looked directly at her. There is something I want you to understand. Elara listened. You do not owe this valley your presence. You do not owe me your presence. You do not owe anyone here a decision. His voice remained calm. Steady. If you stay it should be because you want to stay. Not because you feel obligated. The honesty of those words affected her more than any grand declaration could have. He was giving her freedom. Not pressure. Not expectation. Freedom. And somehow that made her want to stay even more. Later that afternoon the cub found her near the gardens. His face carried unusual determination. The kind that often meant trouble. Or adventure. Sometimes both. Come with me, he said excitedly. Where? It is a surprise. That should concern me. Should. The cub admitted proudly. Before she could ask more questions he grabbed her hand and started pulling her across the valley. They passed houses. Crossed wooden bridges. Followed winding trails. Eventually they reached a hill overlooking the entire settlement. Elara stopped. Her breath caught instantly. The hill had changed. Flowers covered the ground. Hundreds of them. Blue, white, yellow, red. Bright colors stretching across the hillside. In the center stood a small wooden bench. Simple. Beautiful. The cub shifted nervously. I made everyone help. Elara stared at him. You did this. The cub nodded. You always liked flowers. The words nearly broke her heart. Not because of the flowers. Because someone had paid attention. Someone had remembered. Someone had cared. Tears filled her eyes. The cub immediately looked worried. Do you hate it? Well, never. Elara knelt and wrapped her arms around him. I love it. The relief on his face was immediate. Powerful. Pure. And for a moment Elara simply held him. feeling something she had never truly experienced before. Family. Not by blood. Not by obligation. By choice. The days continued moving forward. Yet something inside her was changing. Every conversation, every shared meal, every laugh, every quiet moment, they all became pieces of something larger, something real. One evening the healer invited Ilara to join her for tea. The older woman sat beneath a large tree overlooking the valley. The sun had almost disappeared. Orange light painted the sky. The healer studied her carefully. You have made your decision. Ilara looked surprised. Have I? Yes. The healer smiled knowingly. You just have not admitted it yet. Ilara stared toward the distant mountains. Maybe I am afraid. Of what? Of believing this can last. The healer nodded slowly. Fair fear. Many beautiful things end. The answer offered little comfort. Then the healer continued. But many beautiful things do not. The words settled quietly inside Ilara, like seeds finding fertile ground. That night another gathering filled the valley. Smaller than the previous celebration. More intimate. Families shared stories around several large fires. Children chased one another beneath lantern light. Music drifted softly through the evening air. Ilara sat beside the cub watching sparks rise into the darkness. Suddenly the cub leaned against her shoulder. Then spoke very quietly. You know something? I stopped being scared. Ilara looked at him. The cub stared into the fire. I used to think everyone would leave. The honesty in his voice hurt. Because she understood it perfectly. What changed? The cub smiled. You stayed. Simple words. Yet they carried enormous meaning. Ilara felt tears threaten again. Not from sadness. From love. The pure, uncomplicated love of a child who trusted her completely. At that moment she realized something important. The decision was no longer only about herself. It was about everyone whose lives had become connected to hers. The cub, the healer, the wolf, the people of the valley, the Alpha King. A home was not built in a day. But somehow one had been built around her without her noticing. Several days later the Alpha King asked her to walk with him. The request seemed ordinary. Yet something in his expression suggested otherwise. They followed a path leading toward the highest overlook in the valley. Climb took time. Neither rushed. The wind grew stronger as they reached the summit. Below them the entire valley stretched into the distance. Beautiful, peaceful, alive. For a long moment they simply stood there. Then the Alpha King spoke. The first day I met you I thought I was rescuing someone. Ilara looked at him. His eyes remained fixed on the valley below. I was wrong. She frowned slightly. Because you ended up rescuing all of us. The words stole her breath. The Alpha King turned toward her. You reminded this valley what kindness looks like. You reminded a frightened child what safety feels like. You reminded an old wolf that trust still exists. And you reminded me that strength means very little without compassion. Emotion tightened inside her chest. The Alpha King stepped closer. Not enough to pressure. Not enough to overwhelm. Only enough to be heard clearly. I am not asking you to stay because this valley needs you. His voice remained calm. I am asking because I would like you to stay. The simplicity of the statement made it even more powerful. No grand speech. No dramatic declaration. Only honesty. Only truth. Ilara felt her heart racing. For years she had searched for belonging. For years she had dreamed of a place where she mattered. Now that place stood before her, waiting, patiently, giving her the freedom to choose. She thought about the rainstorm, Chain, the wounded wolf, the frightened cub, every choice that had brought her here, every sacrifice, every moment of kindness, every act of courage. And suddenly she understood. Home had never been something she needed to find. Home was something she had already built through her choices. Slowly a smile appeared, then tears, then laughter, soft and warm. I would like to stay. The words barely left her lips before relief flooded the Alpha King's face. Real relief. The kind that cannot be hidden. The kind that comes directly from the heart. Neither needed to say more. The answer was enough. Weeks later spring fully arrived. Flowers covered the valley. Waterfalls sparkled beneath clear skies. The cub laughed more than he ever had before. The scarred wolf had healed. His strength returned. His eyes no longer carried the same exhaustion. The healer smiled more often. The people of the valley continued welcoming each new day. And Ilara, for the first time in her life, stopped wondering where she belonged, because she already knew. One evening she stood on the same flower-covered hill the cub had created for her. The sunset painted the sky gold and crimson. The cub sat beside her. The Alpha King stood nearby. The scarred wolf rested peacefully in the grass. Everything felt calm. All earned. The journey that began with rain had ended with sunlight. The loneliness that once defined her life had given way to connection. The fear that once guided her choices had been replaced by trust. And as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the mountains, Ilara smiled. Not because life had become perfect, but because she finally understood something beautiful. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness changes everything. Sometimes helping a stranger creates a family. And sometimes the home you spend your whole life searching for is waiting just beyond the moment you choose compassion over fear. The valley grew quiet as evening settled across the land. Lanterns glowed. Laughter echoed softly in the distance. And surrounded by people who loved her, Ilara finally felt what she had dreamed about for so many years. She was safe. She was wanted. She was home.